You say that, okay, we're going to be separating our personal life from the business life. When you're business partners with your significant other, it just doesn't work that way, right? The line gets blurred. When you're having disagreements, it's usually coming from a place of love and that you just want what's best for, for the company or for each other, even though you're expressing it differently.
Welcome to the Rise and Play podcast. I am Sophie Vaux, your host and leadership coach. In the show, my wonderful co-host and I sit down with influential and diverse leaders from the gaming industry to hear about their leadership journey. Not the well-polished stories, but the real stories. The up and down, the breakthrough, and the failures. Or should we rather say learnings? Each episode will transport you into a magical space of vulnerability with our guest. And together, you'll be reminded that no matter how hard it is, you are not alone in this journey and find the courage to keep going. Come and join the ride. Let's begin. Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play. Today, I have the honor to welcome Danni. I'll share a bit of the context of how we've met with Danni. So I was in the Philippines a few weeks ago, meeting my coachee and good friend Luna Javier, which also has her spotlight on a podcast episode. And then we had that idea. I mentioned her, since I'm never in the Philippines, and I know there's a gaming community, I'd love to meet, especially the women, leaders, founders who are in games. And she said, we've never gathered together, but let's do it for the occasion. And then very quickly, we came up with a dinner. And then Danni was there. And I was like amazed. It's like, wow, this is what it takes, women just having conversation, wanting to be there. And I know Manila is not a small city. So it's down in multiple mini cities. We had that day many women from the different districts of Manila who came just for that dinner. And it was a whole journey to be there, but it was amazing. So that's how we've met with Danni. And before we start, Danni Antailan is an indie game developer based in the Philippines. She's the co-founder of Yang Mobile, a studio that specializes in creating compelling, narrative-driven video games. And additionally, she's the board member of the Game Developer Association of the Philippines and one of the founders and organizer of the Philippine Indie Games Initiative, a program that supports the Filipino indie game developers through mentorship and publisher connections. On top of that, Danni is very busy, but she's also a mother of several children. So she loves doing family activities with her kids, collecting cards and board games, playing mobile games with friends. And when I heard your story, Danni, we were sitting next to each other at the dinner. I was very fascinated about, wow, you're a game developer, you created your company, you're a mother. It's like, how does this work? And then you bootstrapped. It's like, I need to ask more. So here we are.
Yeah.
Thank you, Danni, for being here today.
Thank you as well for the invite. And hello, everyone, to everyone listening. I hope everyone is having a great day.
Your studio is probably, I think, if I remember, 10 years old. I'm curious how you started the studio Yang. Where were you at the time? Were you already in games?
When did I first started being interested in games? So ever since I was a child, I was already playing games with my sisters. So I think that's where my love for gaming, first started. And then when I was in high school, when it was time for me to select a course that I wanted to take, my mother was saying, just take anything that has to do with computers. Because by then I was always doing stuff with computers, playing games. And I was pretty lucky that I saw that for the first time ever in our country, a school was offering a full game design and development course. So that's what I took. So I think that was the very first step in me becoming a game developer. So I met my husband back in college. We were both game developers in the same course. And eventually, I started the studio with him. I think even back when we were in college, it was always our dream to start our own game development studio. It was just a matter of when, right? We decided that, okay, maybe, we can work for other gaming companies, see how it goes, learn as much as we can before we started our own studio. So when we graduated from college, we applied for Game Loft Manila. He was always a game programmer and I was more of the creative person. So I was a game designer. Our project back then was Order and Chaos Duels.
Yes, I
Are
know.
you familiar? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like after 7 months or so, Game Loft Manila decided to shut down their game development department. So we were laid off. And then afterwards, we started working for Gumi Asia. So they're the developers of a mobile game called Brave Frontier. So it was very big back then. But unfortunately, I think they also stopped developing the game. We were working less than 1 year for Gumi Asia when I got pregnant. Since we were expecting a child on the way, our priorities sort of changed. So I remember back then, my husband wanted to sort of like study abroad to gain more knowledge, possibly work for a foreign game company. But
Mm.
because of our child, we sort of said, okay, maybe we should reprioritize. You can't go away now because I am pregnant, right? I don't want to be left alone with the child. And don't ask me what we were thinking back then, but it sounded like a really good idea at that time. That maybe we should hurry up and make our own studio instead of like waiting 3 more years. So we could sort of like manage our own time, we could control our time, and we could spend more time with our child, which is just ridiculous because it was like having two babies at once, right? We have a newborn,
Mm.
and then at the same time we had to care for this startup studio. I don't actually know how I managed to survive, but somehow I did. And it was it was chaotic, but it was also super fun. I guess it's definitely not conventional, but honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. It was a fun talk whenever someone asked me, "Oh, how did you start the studio?" And then I say, "Oh, I got pregnant." So, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Looking back, this may not make sense, but I've heard so many stories of also other women founders who decided to start a studio at the time either they were pregnant or they gave birth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the priorities of life were forced, So it's just like, okay, I don't have much time since I'm already there. Why not? So I've seen that pattern actually.
Yeah, and for us as well, we figured that if we are going to fail early, because back then I was just in my early 20s. Like I recently just graduated. I think I was around 20 when I got pregnant. So our logic back then, again, it may not be the best, but our logic was that if we are going to be starting a company, we might as well fail early rather than start a company in our 30s, and then if it didn't pan out, right, we're basically going to be screwed because by then, I don't know, we're going to be around in our mid 30s or late 40s. We don't have as much time to fail anymore. So I think that was also
Mm.
part of the reason why we thought it was a good idea to start a company as early as then.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's very humbling and a good reminder for founders these days where there's a strong word that appears for me here, taking risk. There's no workaround, right? So you took a big risk here. You didn't have any funding. You had each other. So that's a good start, right? And you start also as a life partnership, which I know few studios have started this way and have worked well this way. It's not for everyone. But so here you took a big risk, and 10 years later we see it, I mean much earlier than that, but it paid off, right? So again, here a reminder, it's a risky always adventure to
Mm-hmm.
start a studio, but yeah, if you're tiptoeing on the journey, then you will never know how it was if you didn't give it all. So it sounds to me from the outside, at a time where you were exactly expecting giving birth and then maybe naively thinking I'll manage, but a leap of faith was there to do it anyway. You did it. So I'm curious on the steps when you decided to start the studio in the order of things, because there's a timeline of a baby when it
Yep.
arrives.
Yep.
You start a studio at that time, so I'm trying to think 10 years ago, different time in the market. There was maybe not that craziness around the mobile games yet. Performance marketing, saturation with UA, disease as well in the game. How did that intertwine with your journey as a mother as well?
So flashback to 10 years ago, I gave birth to my daughter May 2015. So we didn't start the studio right away after that. We had the gracefulness to wait 2 months. So we started the company July 2015. So for the first 2 months, I was just there taking care of my daughter, breastfeeding, making sure I don't screw up being a mother, right? Making sure she's alive and breathing every
Mm.
day. And then 2 months after, we decided to start our own studio. The name of our company is called Yang Yang Mobile. And the Yang Yang there is actually named after our daughter. So her name is Yang Yang. It means
Oh.
sheep, I think, in Chinese, because my husband is, is Chinese. So My husband's mother gave the name Yang Yang because she was born in the year of the sheep, 2015. And then for the mobile
Mm.
part of the company name, we were actually supposed to be a mobile gaming company. So we started Yang Yang Mobile thinking that we are going to be making hyper casual mobile games. So it was around the time wherein a lot of Filipino developers were creating mobile games because there was a viral hit called Flappy Bird, and everyone and their mothers was just trying to imitate the success of Flappy Bird. Most of the Filipino developers that we know are doing mobile games, so there must be a reason why. So let's do mobile games as well. So for the first 2 to 3 months of the company, I think from July to August, that's what we were doing. We were creating hyper casual mobile games. I think we were able to release around 6 to 7 in Google Play Store until we realized that we have no idea what we were doing. So all of the games that we released only got like around 5 to 10 downloads. I think it was pity downloads from friends and family. So we really didn't know what we were doing. We didn't even know that in order to make a successful mobile game, you had to throw a lot of money into like user acquisition. So we were super green back then. We kind of realized that this cannot continue because our studio will flop as early as it started if this pattern didn't change. So back then, I was a big fan of visual novels. I love reading visual novels. And then I saw that visual novels, even though they're super duper niche, their fan base are pretty supportive in such a way that if I go to Kickstarter, because I do Kickstarters, I pledge to visual novels that release on Kickstarters, unless it's super sucky, they tend to get funded. Because even though they only have like less than 1,000 backers, the backers are very supportive. So I pitched to my husband, hey, I don't think we're going to be good just continuously making mobile games because we don't know what we're doing. So how about we do a visual novel instead? And I told him that maybe we can put our game up for Kickstarter to receive additional funding. Because back then, our funding for the company was just our life savings. It's the culmination of everything of our allowances back in college,
Mm.
of the layoff funding that Game Loft gave us, right? When they shut down the studio. And a little bit of money from family. So we borrowed
Mm.
money from there to start up the studio. But essentially we're bootstrapped. So we needed to find funding fast, and we didn't want to get an investor because we feel like if we get an investor, a typical creative mindset, oh, we don't want our game to be stifled. We don't want anybody to tell us what to do. So my husband was on board with the idea of trying out a visual novel. So we made our first game called The Letter. We put it up on Kickstarter. And that was like a whole roller coaster on its own because for a while we thought that it was not going to get funded. But it eventually, a huge backer came and saw the potential of the game and then funded the remaining amount that we needed. So we are super duper thankful to him. Until now, he's still, funding our games. But yeah, we got a substantial amount of money from Kickstarter. Not a lot, but for us Filipino developers, it's quite a substantial amount. And we were able to fund the development using the Kickstarter money and also through doing outsourcing jobs on the side. Half of the team members were also getting outsourcing work for clients. But once after the letter got released, and I thank my lucky stars for this because the letter did make us some money and we were able to just fully focus on creating our own original IP ever since then without relying on outsourcing work.
Wow, what a beautiful story. So you pivoted quickly. So you went into a market following the trends of the market because this is where the gold is, to say, but realizing it's never maybe truly what you wanted or were meant to do. It would be quite a long road if you had to compete with the best right now in the world, because a race like AI these days, it's not about who's the most talented, it's also about who's the fastest, who has the most resources and hit the market earlier. So what I hear, you've pivoted quickly, and as you pivoted, you as the creative lead of the studio, you went for what you mastered, what you really knew inside
Mm-hmm.
out, what you loved, visual novels, and with a leap of faith as well, putting out there your idea, persisting, and building your first game. So for first, congratulations for your first game, going through. And there's the dream, I talk about more the Western studios of a dream of just doing creative work and not doing outsourcing. It's almost like a shame. I see here, which is humbling again, it's practical. Until we manage to get our game, or if we do, we need to live as a studio, we need to pay people. And outsourcing is like, let's do it, you know? So I think here is a good reminder. Yeah, you can get funding on a Kickstarter or from other external investors, VCs, and so on. Or you can generate your own revenue like you did. So you, whatever, whichever way worked to fund your first game. And so I'm curious about the distribution of the letter compared to your first experience shipping on mobile. What was the platform? How did you distribute? How did it find its audience to a point that then it could fund the rest of your games after?
For the letter, we targeted mostly PC, so that's Steam. Back then, Steam had this sort of like a Steam green light, wherein, you put your game on Steam and then players would be able to view your game and then they would have to vote if they would like to see your game be hosted on Steam. I think they're going to vote yes or no. A lot of our players came from the Steam green light because they just saw the game on Steam. Helps that Steam has a dedicated player base that often regularly looks at the Steam greenlight page, just scour for the next indie gem or indie hit. Unlike with Google Play, unlike with the mobile market, because I think when you release your own game in mobile, you don't have that dedicated eyeballs that's just like looking or browsing at the games that are newly released in mobile. It's usually done through user acquisition. So I think those are the two biggest differences. For the letter, since we placed the game up in Kickstarter, we made sure that we also had a demo because back then in Kickstarter, demos are not really required. But we wanted to build some sort of goodwill that we could actually, have the capability to finish the game and we're not just gonna scam them and get their money, right? So it was very important for us to have a demo. And then since we already had a playable demo, we reached out to streamers or YouTubers, let's players, and said that, hey, we're new game developers and we're making this, horror visual novel. It's not a genre that's often explored when it comes to visual novels. Maybe you would like to give it a try. We also put mini games in there so that, it's a little bit more interactive and you're not just sitting there reading. Several big YouTubers picked it up. Like, I think that really helped us a lot because they already have an audience, right, that are interested in the game. And I think that was mostly what really helped cement the fan base of the letter. It was a combination of us being in the Steam green light and, YouTubers thinking that the game looked fun enough for them to stream it to their players.
Where you are today, how many games have you released since that first game, The Letter?
So I think we have around 4 games released. And we're on our way to our 5th game, which is releasing later this year.
Yeah, amazing. How big is your team?
I think when we first started the team, like back in 2015, we were around seven or eight. And then right now we're around 20 people. And that's actually for me the sweet spot, right? Like regardless if I made millions of bucks in the future or not, I would like to keep the team just at 20, possibly maximum 30. There was a time where in my husband and I, talked about the direction of the company because so funny thing, my husband and I often had clashing ideas, right? I don't know how we managed to make it work, but somehow we did. So for me, I wanted to keep the team small, and when we have enough funding, when we have a successful game, he wanted to scale it to 50 to 100. I managed to convince him after several I told you so, events in the company that I think it would be best if we just, keep the team around 20 to 30 because we tried expanding, right? And it was a disaster because we're developers. We're not just like businessmen or leaders that just focuses on making money for the business. So one of the challenges is that we have this big team that we cannot manage properly because we're also doing development work, we're doing creative work. So, we kind of realize that if we want to have the best of both worlds, have some time to focus on creative work and still keep our sanity for managing the team, I think just keeping, a tight knit group of 20 people, 20 capable people would be at the right spot instead of just 50 to 100. But this might be the romantic side of me talking. Um, I want to have fun making games. I'm not in this for the money. I don't have a grand goal of, hosting like 1,000 person company, right? I just really want to make my own games that I love to play, that I like to create with people I love to make it with. Whenever someone asks, "Oh, what's your team size? Do you plan on expanding?" That's the answer that I say. That, "Oh, we're 20 right now. Oh, it's small, but we're happy." So
Hmm.
yeah.
That's wise. I've seen also that mistakes from studios expanding, scaling too fast. But what I'm hearing, which is important for founders, is having a clear vision why you have your own studio, right? And listening to you, I hear a creative need to express, to create. And this doesn't make sense when you're a huge team where as the founder or main leader, you end up managing the business more
Yeah.
than you are doing the creative work. So I've seen that is the main point of tension for game founders, the balance between creating and managing. And after 10 years, a decade running a studio, I hear a lot of wisdom and clarity from you. From what I understand, you want to keep creating. That's it.
Yeah.
That's the goal. That's not like I want to reach. I mean, I'm sure you have some maybe numbers goals, but that's not really why you're doing it. You want to
Yeah.
keep creating. Hmm. It's always fascinating for me when a couple works together, build a business together, how that works. I know for myself, we're two creative people with my partner, so that would not work. We would fight all the time. So that's not going to work. But for the extent you can share, what would you tell other founders who are maybe with their partner building a studio? What has worked and what have been the more points of tension?
Okay, so you're right, Sophie. It's definitely not for everyone. So one of my colleagues, Sir James, he used to work with his wife. Like he started a company with his wife. And from what I know after that experience, they don't anymore. Like they have their own companies, but from what he told me, they don't work as much anymore because, fights tend to rise, right? And I know this from personal experience as well, that when you fight professionally, it tends to carry over to the personal aspect of it, right? Like it's just unavoidable. Even though you say that, okay, we're going to be separating our personal life from the business life, when you're business partners with your significant other, it just doesn't work that way, right? The line gets blurred. So my partner and I, we fight like a lot, a lot. Like we fight from the smallest things to the big things that sometimes when we fight, we even forget what we're fighting about. So, to be honest, my advice is that you'd really need a lot of patience and sacrifice, and you would have to swallow your pride a lot as well. If you have a bad relationship with your partner, I feel like none of it matters. So I just learned how to give way. I learned to be less prideful. I learned how to say sorry even though I feel like I'm not in the wrong, but I still say sorry anyway. Just to keep the peace. And my partner is mature enough, right, to see where I'm coming from. And he is. So that's one of the things that I'm thankful for. The second advice that should come before that is that you should choose your partner wisely, right? Not just a business partner, like even personal life in a relationship. You don't need to be 100% compatible to each other, right? But as long as you're able to find the middle ground and at the end of the day still respect each other, always think that when you're having disagreements, it's usually coming from a place of like love, and that you just want what's best for for the company or for each other, even though you're expressing it differently. So it's a pretty hard lesson to learn, to be honest. Like I've been with my partner for around 15 years by next year, and this is still something that I need to keep learning every day.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Danny. I know it's always a bit complicated to share. And I've heard different stories, but in the end, the piece of wisdom you shared, I would say, applies as well when you're not with your life partner building a business. That's, I would say, the commitment. Even if you're a solo founder, you will have partners around you who tell you where you might be wrong, and you have to swallow your pride quite a lot, actually. So it's a very humbling journey, actually, to be an entrepreneur. It's tested at the max when you are with your life partner, because
Yeah.
there's no retreat, right? Where it's at home, we're there with you and it's confronting you, it's reminding you. But I see as well talking to you, and again, there's so much wisdom and learning you've internalized through the journey. It's there with you. So that's for me the also the result in how you lead the situation, and you seem to have seen and experienced a lot. And it's there with you each time, as you grow as a studio and dealing with uncertainty. About the games. So I'm curious also on the creative direction, because today the market might be a bit different from when you launched, but still you kept the direction. What would you say? You started from a place which is called Yang Yang Mobile, and it was with a different intention. What is maybe the DNA of the games you create, the visual novels? Because these days there are so many studios that are going on visual novels. I mean, it's a broad term, but I'm very curious about what makes your games the Yang Yang games.
I think we've been lucky because when we first started making visual novels, it's not a lot back then, like compared to right now. And I think our strategy has always been to offer a better game in every aspect that we could possibly manage to afford. So, for example, for our first game, The Letter, back then the visual novels are pretty static. So you only have, a simple background, characters, they're not moving, they don't even have voice acting. We tried to make all of that happen for the letter and we managed to. So the letter, compared to a typical visual novel back then, it was animated. The backgrounds are moving, the characters are also moving. We even have full English voice acting, which is very very rare because it was expensive. It's very unheard of to find an English visual novel to have full English voice acting. It's only Japanese visual novels that tend to do that. We also upgraded our narrative. So what I mean by that is typical visual novels, especially the indie ones, they promise you branching paths, but then at the end of the day, it's really just the ending that changes. But for the letter, we made sure that it's not just the ending that changes, even the path, the journey towards that ending actually changes. So it drove our writers insane, but it was worth it because even until now, players are still praising the game for its branching paths. I think that's always been our philosophy, that we don't necessarily have to invent something innovative, right? It's just that we need to make our game better than what is already out there in the market. And so far, it worked well for us. We managed to survive for 10 years just from making visual novels that, have voice acting and are animated. So the players really appreciate the polish because they can feel that a lot of love has been put on this game. Aside from just making static visual novels, we also tried to insert a little bit of gameplay so that when we approach streamers about it, they have an incentive to play it because there's something happening in the screen. It's just not going to be, endless dialogue upon dialogue, which is, I do understand it may not be the most exciting to watch someone play. So, yeah, we try to balance the narrative aspect with the more gameplay aspect just to really try to make the game have a more mass market appeal, if that makes sense.
Amazing. What I'm hearing, although you say you didn't want to reinvent the wheel or create from scratch something new, it's pretty innovative at the time where you always go on improvement, like what's not out there in the
Mm-hmm.
category, and what are the things we dream of doing that hasn't been done in that way. And then you just went for it. So I can totally see from a business point of view how that worked. So it was
Mm-hmm.
very intuitive. It's really interesting because what you are creative, but you're also quite business savvy. You understand the market and see, okay, as a player or offering something here, what is the value I can create? And you created the value in the places that matter for the category, right? So in the gameplay, in the visuals, in the story depth, the branching. And you even thought of the streaming part, which is, very strategic. So I think there's a lot of depth in your thinking here that is not just creative.
I think it also helps because I'm a fan of visual novels myself. So I just did the things that I wish, I could play, right? If we decided to make a different game genre, for example, I'm not sure if I would be getting the same kind of ideas because I just really love the visual novel market.
Yeah, amazing. And today, as you distribute your games, do you have a fan base, an audience that is following, your games as you grow, or are you still relying on Steam? You launch and you have a process to distribute.
So we're still mostly relying on Steam, but we do have a small but dedicated fan base. So it's not big. Like it's just really super niche. But we do have loyal followers that would just play whatever games that we release out there, which I'm super thankful for because when we started the company, we didn't have support from the players, but now even though they're just, I don't know, like 500 people that are always looking forward to really to the release of our games, it's super heartwarming, it's super humbling. Of course we have a studio to run, so relying on 500 sales is not gonna put food on the table, right? So of course we still had to rely on Steam, but I would say that it's much easier now because we're not releasing our game into silence. Like we have 500 people that we could rely on to help spread the word for us, right? So
Hmm.
I think that's always been our sort of like marketing strategy. We just do our best to make a really darn good game. And then when our players, see the amount of love that we've poured into the game, they would find it in themselves to, recommend it to their friends. And hopefully, a snowball kind of effect happens from there on.
Great. Yeah, that's the hardest part with distribution and marketing. But here again, the focus, making an excellent game, it's the best marketing. The product is the best marketing,
Mm-hmm.
actually. Yes, of course, you need the marketing strategy, but it's an amplifier, it's not a fixer. So I think this is a good reminder here. Put the effort in the right place first. The second part is much easier. Like we have an over index in marketing these days, and then maybe games that have lost a bit their soul. I see this a lot on mobile where it's an attempt of making something that makes money, but it doesn't have that soul. This is more something we see in the space of mobile. A few last questions. Family life. So you work with your husband. You have two kids, three
Three
kids,
kids, yeah, and one
three.
dog.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you shared with me when we were sitting at the dinner, but I'm curious more. What's your organization of life to be able to life and studio?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I've learned how to embrace chaos, right? Like I mentioned to you in the dinner, like sometimes I'm having a meeting and then kids would just barge in super noisy. So don't worry, I locked the door so that they won't barge in the middle of this podcast. But yeah, it's just, I've learned how to, embrace the chaos and actually love it. So I'm actually very fortunate that we are based in the Philippines, wherein labor is not as expensive compared to richer countries, like, for example, the USA. So we could actually afford to hire nannies to help us out. It's actually my auntie. It's a family member, not just anyone, right? That whenever I'm working, she's the one that takes care of the kids, make sure that the house is managed. Because I'm no super mom. I can't do everything. I could only focus on the business, play with the kids, focus on their education. But, doing the laundry, cleaning, like washing the dishes, I can't do that. Even though I want to do that, I don't know how to do it. I am not a good housewife. I don't know how to cook. I'm very lucky to have that kind of support system. My husband's parents also come here to stay for us. So when they're here, it's the grandparents that take care of the kids while we do the work. So my day to day life usually goes, I wake up in the afternoon, like around 1 p.m., because it's the start of the work day. So from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., that's my deep focus work. We have meetings. And then by 5 p.m., I spend time with the kids until they sleep at around 8 p.m. And then from 8 p.m. to 12 midnight, I usually do, personal stuff like go to the gym, play games with friends. And then from 12 midnight until 6 a.m., that's another round of work. And then by 6 a.m., the kids start to wake up to go to school. And then I greet them, say goodbye to them before they head off. And then that's when I sleep and then wake up again 1 p.m. the following day. I'm not sure if that's a healthy lifestyle, to be completely honest. I've always tried to fix my sleeping schedule. My dream is to be like, one of those 5 a.m. early risers, seize the day type of person. But I don't know. I've just always been some sort of a night owl. I work best when I stay up so late. But yeah, that's usually how my life goes. And then on the weekends, I still work during the weekends because, when you're a founder, work doesn't really stop, right? But I work less on weekends just so we could have, we could go to the mall during Sundays and all that. And I also help my kids prepare for their next week of schoolwork if they have any assignments. As a mom, I always feel like I could be spending more time with the kids, especially right now wherein our game is releasing in November. And as you know, the game developers, right? When your game is near its release date, work tends to pile up and it's crunch time. And more every day, I spend less time with the kids in order to, just make sure that we release on time. So the guilt is eating at me as the launch goes because I feel like, oh, instead of deciding to read the script for my game, for example, I could, spend 30 more minutes with the kids. Like just like I mentioned to you a while ago, I just went back from a 3-day gaming convention, right? That's like morning to nighttime. So we're there like around 9 a.m. to man our booths, and then we go home around 10 p.m. I barely saw the kids for the past 3 days. Like I just saw them in the morning, told them, "Oh, bye. We're going to a gaming convention for work," and then when I get home, they're already asleep in the bed. So
Mm.
yeah, that tugs at my heartstrings, but it's a path that I've chosen. I just tell myself that when our game gets released, I'm gonna, make up the lost time. I don't know. I tell my husband that, hey, for a month, I'm just not gonna work too much. I'm just gonna be here at home, play with the kids.
Mm. I feel you, Danny. And, that's also important to share here because when you follow your passion, you build a business, it implies sacrifice. I mean, of course, it's always a balance of sacrifice and it's a balance, right? So it's not like to say it has to be a very painful sacrifice. And even the lifestyle, you organize your life to be matching, you being able to create from your passion and also, of course, have a family life.
Yeah.
So I think for me, listening without the judgment, because I know it's hard as a founder and a mother to not have put guilt on top. It's inspiring that you do your thing your way and
Mhm.
organize your day. And so when you share with me your schedule, I was fascinated because I was like, this is not a common story, but it's like a common day routine. But also your studio is not a common story. So it's more embracing it and also your way of being. When you say night owl, and maybe it works for you right now until it doesn't. And then you adjust like you've adjusted in the past. So
Yeah.
that's more what I'm saying to give yourself a bit of self compassion because I think it's remarkable to manage it this way. It works for you. I can
Mhm.
recognize that. So for me, also founder to founder, it's always inspiring to hear other stories. I have my own way of doing things. I don't expect others to follow, but I don't have to follow others either. You have to trust yourself.
Mhm.
Mm. Okay, as we are wrapping up, what are you excited about for what's next? I hear there's a launch in November, but something I haven't asked, I should have asked. Please share.
So this is our fifth game. It's called High Time. So it's still a visual novel, but it's also a cooking simulator, right? So you
Mm.
make donuts for your emotionally messy customers because your donuts have a special ingredient in them wherein it could affect their emotions. So the game features
Oh.
several flavors, and each of the flavor correspond to a different emotion. So for example, vanilla makes them happier. Red velvet gives them more courage. Blueberry makes them more honest. So your customers in high time, they come to you with a problem. And then as their donut therapist, quote unquote, it's up to you to sort of like diagnose or figure out which type of mood would work best with their problems. So yeah, that is coming out this November. That game has been, a long time coming. Everyone in the team is super nervous about that game, how well it's gonna do. We're hoping for the best. We hope that it's gonna be our most successful game yet. And that's, we've just been really hard at work in developing it and promoting it. So we're also gonna be in Gamescom next month, and that's the game that we're gonna be showcasing there. Again, it's releasing on November on Steam, and then it will also be out after the Steam release, probably around early 2026. It's also going to be released in mobile and Nintendo Switch. So, yeah, super excited for it. Also super duper nervous. I hope that all of our hard work would pay off in the end because that game has just been delayed to oblivion. At this point, I think a huge burden will be off of our shoulders, not just my shoulders, but everyone in the team as well once the game releases. And then after that, we also have, another game that's in the works. It's not yet announced. And this game is gonna be something different. It's not gonna be a visual novel anymore. It's still gonna be narrative heavy, but it will have a lot more gameplay. So it's a new territory for our team. So that's also nerve wracking on its own. But yeah, overall, I'm feeling hopeful about the future. I hope that we could continue to make more games because I think, honestly, I really don't know what I do if not to make games. like,
Hmm.
it's a thought that I've always had that if I didn't, if one day, right, our studio closes down, for example, right, because, we need to be prepared for anything that might happen. I honestly wouldn't know what I would do with my life because this is just the thing that I've always known. Ever since I was in college, I've been making games. 15 years later, I'm still making games. So, yeah, for me, this has been my life passion, I would say.
Hmm.
And I just, yeah, I think I'm at the place in my life wherein I'm happy just having this kind of career being an indie game developer. Despite all of the hardships, I think I've been pretty lucky to find a good partner, loving kids and very understanding too, as well as a good team. I've been talking a lot about myself for the past, I don't know, an hour or so, but I really wouldn't be here today without, my team. They've stuck with us. It's a crazy journey. Like, they have no assurance if we're gonna, be successful, if we're gonna make it one day or not, right? But they laid out their hopes and believed in our leadership.
Thank you for sharing, Danny. An exciting launch. I'll follow that closely. I amplify, and I will play it. When you said it would be on platform, I have a Switch 2 and PlayStation, so for sure I'll follow. But you get my curiosity when it's like, okay, emotion, cooking simulation, visual novels, a narrative. You have me here. So it sounds really exciting. And I hear also the doubt, the uncertainty with a new launch that always is there. That's also part of the journey. And this is a problem for the future to solve if it's even a problem. So I hear the doubts. And again, I'm here with you. But, this is just a thought at the moment. So being with it, and a lot of credit to the team and your support system to allow you to run a studio and amazing games like this. So a lot of wisdom and learning today. And I'm happy you took the time. I hope also it gives you some gratitude for what you've achieved so far with your studio. Thank you very much, Danny. Good luck for the launch, and I'll follow closely and amplify.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you for having me here in your podcast. Thank you so much for, giving me a platform to share my story.
Of course. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. We keep growing our community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders, because we have so much more we can learn from each other. And if you want to accelerate your growth, I offer creative leadership coaching and workshop, plus other free resources that you can find on riseandplay.io. I can't wait to connect with you. Have a great week, and remember to take care of yourself. Until the next time,